Good morning. Okay. So here's where we are. We're on February 5th, talking about writing quality. And the P1 is due tonight. And I'll get those graded as quickly as I can. I grade those myself. They're generally fairly quick, but there's like 90 plus of you people. So there's just a lot. The homework 2, the second coding assignment is due on Monday. And there should be that quick extra credit quiz open at the time to tell me how long it took you. And then normal stuff, quiz next Wednesday, lab, pre-lab next Wednesday, and so on. P2 is not due till way down here, February 22nd, that's 2.5 weeks. But I want to remind you of it because to do a good job on it, it does take a fair amount of effort. And so, that's what today's talk is about and what next week's talk is about too. So just be aware, be thinking about it, look over the assignment and look at the report format that I give you and start thinking about how you're going to fill these things in. And what do I want? I want this. Okay. I got really interested in writing quality quite a few years ago. I was teaching a class on modeling and simulation to seniors, and they had to do a project and they had to do a report. And what I found is they couldn't write. And so I really stress writing in all my classes at all levels. So even though this is supposed to be a freshman sophomore class, I try to give you a lot of tips and pointers about writing. And through the years, I would like to think those efforts paid off, but guess what? Employers still complain about our grad students and pretty much every grad student around the country, they can't write. Learn to write, tech writing well, and it really helps your career out. Okay, there's the outcomes. Okay, so tech writing. We have a tech writing class, as you know, and they do cover most of the stuff that we talk about in here, maybe all of it, but what they don't necessarily do, they don't necessarily cover the topic in a domain-specific way. So they're teaching tech writing to engineers and scientists and aviation people, business people, but once you get into the communities, the writing styles do differ a little bit. And so what I want to talk about is how in the software world and really in the engineering world in general, we do writing. The primary thing to remember, there's a couple of things to remember, and if you can get these things down, it makes your life a lot easier. The first, technical writing is about clarity and accuracy. Clarity and accuracy. Be very clear in what you say. No fuzzy words. Fully defined words. If you have to define the word, define it. And then always use the same word in the same way. Otherwise, you introduce ambiguity and accuracy. So it's really about just telling people factual information. And so I have that line there. It doesn't have to be interesting. It has to be correct. Several years ago, a student emailed me and said, "Oh, I'm having trouble with my writing because I can't make it interesting." And I emailed back, "Boy, do I have good news for you? It doesn't have to be interesting. It has to provide factual information. And if someone needs that information, then it's the most interesting thing in the world." Concise, precise, and consistent. Usually, as a general rule, fewer words, the better. And by the way, writing with fewer words is hard. I can't remember where the quote was from. It might be Oscar Wilde, but it was, I'm sorry, I'm sorry this letter is so long. I was going to write you a short one, but I didn't have the time. Avoid subjective terms. We'll talk about that a lot. Even when I say we'll talk about that a lot, that's subjective, right? A lot, very. This is very important. I want the GUI to be easily understandable. Well, what's easy? I want the game to be easy, or the project to be easy to use. How do I measure easy? So there's words that creep in our daily life that are perfectly acceptable that cause problems in tech writing. Concise, if you can say it in fewer words and it doesn't lose any meaning, fewer words are better. So, you know, how long should I get this question a lot? How long should this be? Long enough to do the job. If you can do the job in a paragraph, you know, good for you. I doubt you can, but if you can, then that's the length. Most of these things, like in P2, I ask you to do a description of your software, and you know, most people can do that in a long page, certainly within 2 pages. And generally, I try to ask them to stretch it to 2 pages because I want as much definition in there as possible, not just general fuzzy wavy ideas, actual definition. So I don't have any minimum page requirements or maximum page requirements on your documents. If you can truly get the thing done and it's a 1-page report, you know, P2 is normally 4 pages long or something like that, not including the title page. If you can do it in 1 page, good for you. I doubt that your projects can do that, but it can, you know, it's conceivable. Once you understand these points, shorter is better. You want clarity, you want accuracy, you're providing information. Life gets a lot easier. The pattern of how to present information is always the same. You know, an introductory paragraph, do some overview stuff, topic, where you're drilling down into the topics. If you need a conclusion, then you just restate what you already said. You know, you're always saying things 3 times. I'm going to tell you this. I'm telling you this. This is what I told you. Clarity, you have to define your terms consistently. If you're doing the zombie game and you call something a zombie, you can't start calling it a monster, because I don't know what a monster is. You told me what a zombie was, but you didn't tell me what a monster is. So once you define a term, keep using it. It may mean that that term shows up a lot in the same paragraph. It looks repetitive because it keeps popping up. And in creative writing, they say don't do that, which is absolutely correct for creative writing. But this is not creative writing, this is informational writing. And if you start using different terms for the thing you told me existed a few minutes ago, it's confusing to me. Or if you use the same term to mean a different thing, it's confusing to me and I don't get the information. Here's this vagueness stuff. The program takes many factors into account. We get this a lot. The program will take into account A, B, and a couple of other things. No. What are those couple of other things? Maybe you don't know at the time you're writing this because you're not sure if you can do it. That's okay. The program will take into account A, B, C. As a stretch goal, the program will also take into account D and E, but now you've clarified what the things are. GUI is designed for easy understanding. We get that one a lot. So don't, see, I keep saying a lot. I should get a percentage, right? I should get a metric. This market could be considered a simulation of market conditions. Well, if it could be considered a simulation, then why don't you just call it a simulation? This project is a simulation of market conditions. Unneeded words sneak in there. And I think, whether on purpose or not, writing styles for some students are built to pad words because of previous assignments where you had to have 3,000 words or 5,000 words or something like that, where you had a word count problem. And so you learned to write longer, inefficient sentences to meet the requirement. I'm asking you to write as short as possible and still get the message across. If you have a lot of things to list, so I'm going to do a character generator for a Dungeons and Dragons-like game, and here are all the characters. I have a fighter that has these characteristics, and a monk that has these characteristics, and a priest that has these characteristics, and a thief that has these characteristics. You put that in paragraph form, it's a disaster. But what a great table that makes, or what a great bulleted list that makes. That would be a great table. Character type, characteristic 1, characteristic 2, characteristic 3. Lay it out in the table. Then you give the table a title, table 1, characteristics of the character types, and then you refer to it in the document. Please see table 1. Graphics are also great. You know, even early on, you may have an idea of how you want your game to look. You can draw that up in PowerPoint, or you can use some kind of drawing software and get a rough hack at what your GUI is going to look like and pop it up. Those are helpful. Pictures are really helpful. Tables and bulleted lists are really helpful. I advise you to use them as much as possible. Personal pronouns. This is kind of a pet peeve of mine. Do not use personal pronouns. No I, my project. I want to. None of that stuff. In tech writing, particularly in published writing, personal pronouns are forbidden. There is a little bit of laxity coming into the community, but as a general rule, it's forbidden. And in this class, no good. Read any of your, read a math textbook and tell me how many times the author says, I. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about it in the proposal. Yeah, because I haven't warned you ahead of time. All right, so yes, she's asking, can we have personal pronouns in the proposal? Yeah, and but after this, I usually in the proposal I'll say in the future no personal pronouns if somebody's using it, but after the proposal, then no. And I can't punish you for something I haven't told you is bad yet, right? And kind of late in the game. Okay, yeah, wait, I'm using personal pronouns right now. Yeah, because this is not technical writing. Seriously, read your textbooks. Very rarely will you find a personal pronoun in there. In history, they, because they're talking about different peoples, or he, because they're talking about specific people. That makes sense. But in a math textbook, not so much. In a aerodynamics textbook, not so much. Software engineering. If you need to use formulas, go ahead and put them in your description. This is what I mean by clarity and accuracy. What's more clear and accurate than a mathematical formula? Oh, you probably don't need to use formulas. Sure you do. Look at my sheep-sheepdog game. I said I wanted the sheep to run away from the dog. What a great opportunity to have a little picture of a dog with a circle around it. This is the circle of sensitivity or something, or a sheep with a circle around it, to point out that if the dog ever enters that circle, the sheep will start to move. Oh, and by the way, where does the sheep move? I draw an arrow from the sheep to the dog, put a little alpha in there. There's my angle. The sheep moves away at this angle from east or from north, however I want to define. So I've got figures and formulas in my stupid sheep-sheepdog game. If that game is that simple, needs formulas, you probably do too. You want to do projectile motion? You want to do a platformer where your person jumps? Isn't that projectile motion? Maybe you need the formula for projectile motion. So they do creep in. If you have a formula, you should, we'll talk about citations in a minute, that you should cite where it came from. Projectile motion formula. Go to your physics textbook, cite the textbook. Problem description, if you look at P2, it's going to be a problem description, and you're describing software, and you will need some formulas in there to describe, how these things are going to work. In the P3, which is the requirements and test document, you're describing requirements. Now, if you look in the homework, I gave you formulas, right? I said, here's your requirements in homework 1, here's your requirements, and here's the formulas. And your test cases are, you put this in and this should come out based on the formula. And for homework 2, it's the same trick. So you need to define all these things clearly somewhere ahead of time so that when you start doing your requirements, you actually have requirements that are real, that can be tested, that can be measured against. And having formulas is a great way to do that. It also does another thing. When you start programming, gosh, I wonder if I can program this. So, I'm going to put down that I'm going to do this. I don't know if I can do it or not. If you start putting formulas in up front, you don't have to worry about, gosh, how am I going to do this while you're programming? It's already there. Right? Just write a method that does the formula. It also gives you a good idea of whether or not what you want to do is achievable by you. So if you can't figure out any formula, any way to do this, then maybe it's going to be a tough project because, it's not doable. By the way, if anybody's doing machine learning, like a genetic algorithm, you need to describe what genetic algorithms are. You don't need to go into 10 pages of it, but give a good understanding of what's happening, and then describe how you're going to use a genetic algorithm. There's variations in crossover and mutation rates and things like that. And references. So this is something that students have a hard time with, it seems, initially. And the problem that students generally have is that every claim needs a reference. Yeah, you don't need to in the proposal, right? The proposal is very top level. Now, if you want to, that's fine. More is always better, more clarity. But the proposal is so short that it's just an overview, a description of what's happening. That's why I'm not applying these formal rules to the proposal itself. The trick is that for every claim, you have to do one of two things. You have to either prove the claim yourself in the body of the document, or have a reference and a citation. Now, what's the difference? A reference is the list of documents at the bottom under the references or bibliography where you got your information. The citation is the citation actually in the text itself that says, 40 million people live in Germany. And then you put some kind of a citation there, marking where the reference, where that number came from. That's a citation. And then at the bottom is the reference. German population handbook, or whatever. I think there's more than 40 million people in Germany. Anyway, and here's where students here's where they fall down, tend to. They don't realize how many claims they're making. So I would ask you to read a sentence that you wrote and ask if anyone would say, prove it. And if they can legitimately ask, prove it, you need a reference, which means you need a lot more than students tend to think. If you look at some, published journal papers or conference papers, they can be, conference papers are short, 6 pages or 10 pages long. How many references? 30, 40, 50? Because you need one for every claim. I had one student one time, I have to have a reference after almost every sentence. And I'm like, oh, thank you, you get it now. That's it. Now, there's some stuff about, sometimes there's style choices. So let's say you have 2 sentences in a row and they both came from the same document. Do I put 2 references, citations in, or do I put 1 citation in? And, there's a style choice there. As long as you think the reader can understand that both of those were attributed to the same place, that's fine. Sometimes that extends to 3 or 4 sentences. And that's more of a style choice, but you have to have it. Every claim requires a citation. And that's a tough sell, because I'll tell you, we go around talking in our normal daily lives. We claim stuff all the time. That's a vague term, by the way. We claim stuff all the time, and we don't even realize it. My advice is to hand your document to somebody before you turn it in, like your roommate or another person in class, have them read over it and have them underline every sentence where they would ask you, prove it, prove it. Because that's what I'm going to do when I'm reading it. Prove it, prove it, prove it. Oh, some of you, a number of you, that is non-zero, will say something like, I'm going to do a platformer game and it's based on this popular platformer game. Well, first of all, get the word popular out of there because that's a claim. Now you got to prove it. So it's based on this game. Okay, now you need the, you have to accredit it. That's a trademark name. And then you have to do some kind of a citation. The website, if it's an online game, the website where you're playing that online game is not the citation. That's not a good one. A better one would be, say, an article in Wired or an article in a gaming magazine that talks about the game. That would be a good reference. What about online references? Sometimes you can't get away from it. Sometimes the only thing you can find is online. Now, what do I mean by online? I mean like a blog where there's no external documentation. There's a difference between receiving the document online and the document only exists online. So, for example, I often will download papers, published papers from websites. And if I download that published paper, then I received it from the web, but since it's published, it exists outside the internet. You know, the Journal of Algorithms exists outside the internet. So if the internet goes down, the Journal of Algorithms still exists. That's what you want. You want a stable, actually published document. Now, the fact that I retrieved it from the web has no bearing because that thing exists in a published journal. So if you're getting some, the same thing with the New York Times and Washington Post and, wherever else. All of those things are published, things that exist outside the web. You happen to retrieve the information online, as opposed to if I run a blog and I say some stuff and I don't publish it anywhere, it's just on the blog, then that's a less desirable source. And there's two reasons. One, of course, is the information quality tends to be lower on blogs. But the bigger reason is, remember, why are you doing this? What's the whole point of these citations? The whole point of the citations is somebody should be able to go through your paper and read it. And if they said, prove it, prove it, prove it, I want to see if I agree with this person. I want to see if you're interpreting the data correctly. Then they should be able to go to those other sites, the references, and read it and confirm or refute what you're saying. But if it's a blogger and they take down their website, you can't go there anymore. So it's not so much, accuracy could be an issue, but it's not just about accuracy, it's about permanence. So that if somebody wanted to check your work, and by the way, somebody will always check your work, then they'll still find that information. And I'm not talking about 2 weeks from now when you turn in something in 2 years from now, 5 years from now. That's why you're doing this. Remember the scientific method? Oh, I have a hypothesis, and then I do an experiment, and I have data, and based on the data, I draw a conclusion. Well, remember the other part of the scientific method? I publish my methods and data so that others can replicate my experiment. So, and then that's the history of science, right? Somebody in France makes some discovery. What's the first thing that happens? People in the US and Japan and Germany and China try to duplicate the discovery. That's the first thing they do. Similar thing here. Someone should be able to duplicate your reasoning. Same idea. Okay, and lastly, of course, plagiarism. Don't. If you're copying almost anything, almost anything, it's plagiarism. And I've got a document about that with some examples. If you take one sentence and lift it from an author and put it in your document, and there's, you don't put any quotes and you don't cite that author, that's plagiarism. Most students get that. What they don't tend to get is if you take two sentences and you take the first half of one sentence and the second half of the other sentence and smush them together and make your own sentence, that's also plagiarism. You have to find your own words for these things. That can be really tough, especially in tech writing. Every now and then I've encountered an author, I'm trying to write something, I've encountered an author, and that author said it perfectly. There was no way I could improve upon what that author is saying. I cannot use those words unless I attribute them to them. It can be tough because in technical writing, when people are describing the factual information, there's only so many ways to describe the factual information. And I'll dig up my examples and show them. Obviously in code, copying code without reference is plagiarism. Now, having said that, when can you copy code or borrow code or whatever? Number one, get help from students, get help from TAs. That is not plagiarism. That is not copying. That is not cheating. And up in your comment block, you're allowed to say, hey, author, right? I'm the author. And underneath that, you can say, with help from, or I was, with assistance from, or second author if you want. Primary author, secondary author, something like that. The idea is you're acknowledging that you didn't do the work all on your own. You got help from somebody, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's called normal. If, however, you are saying to someone someone took this course 2 semesters ago or last semester, and you're like, oh, I need to do something. And they're like, oh, I got something that'll fit. And you cut and paste a single method from them. That's plagiarism. As you would expect in a class like this, we mostly get issues with online plagiarism where people take code from online and bring it down. And then they change a few variables and they move around the sequences of the methods. And Garfield will never find this. As far as I know, I find it. I can't prove the times I didn't find it. But this is a beginning programming class. And so, if you're getting really highly polished, clever code online doing unusual things, then that's kind of a sign. That's also one of the reasons, by the way, that I did this P4, P5, P6 deliverables where you're doing these short-term code drops. That way I get to see the code actually develop from scratch. And I feel really confident that you're actually doing it, and it takes the pressure off of you because early on in that first code drop, you and I get to talk, and we get to talk about your code and say, oh, well, I can tell you, oh, if you did this, this will be better. If you do this, it'll be easier for you. Or if you're confused about something, and that way your code development goes more smoothly. When do students plagiarize? Generally, they panic at the end of the semester, is my view. That's what I tend to run into. Since I've banned a bunch of those games where there's a whole bunch of online code, the amount of plagiarism's gone down a lot. What if you need to import some kind of library? Some of you guys are going to do interactions with Excel documents, which I think is great. And by the way, that meets your file IO requirements. And you have to download, and I don't know the name of it, but there are some Java packages that are pre-built that will interact with Excel. So you have to bring those into your code. Not a problem. Not a problem. Especially if these things are not central to your code, right? If it's just part of your project that you needed to get your actual project done, but it's not the meat of your project, that makes sense. But if you downloaded that thing and it did all your work for you, that's not so good. So anytime you want to do something like that, just give me throw me a message in Canvas and we'll make sure it's okay. And it is almost always okay. I had people download, I think they wanted to do Some people wanted to do some networking stuff. I think they needed some special networking packages. Some people wanted to interact with other devices, and they needed like an API to interact with the other devices. Not a problem. Not a problem. I think somebody needed a drawing package once that would do special organization of hierarchical structures. Not a problem. Those things, because it's not the central heart of your project. It's just, you know, an annoying bit that you need to get the work done. Okay, so that's that. We're going to go into some examples next. Do we have questions? I always have the wrong thing up. There we go. Oh, come on. Okay, so here's a problem description that's not so good. What's not so good about it?
It already starts with my.
Yeah, right off the bat, first word, yeah, the first word. Let me see here. I give you this template. If I can get it to come up, there we go. I give you this template. All right, so when you turn in your P2, there's the template. And you notice there's a title page on this. And yeah, so you can't really tell from this because you don't know if I snipped it, but there was no title page. It just said project. And then, right, it starts with my, so right off the bat. My final project will deal a lot, and you don't have to say final project. There's only one project in the class, right? So your project. How would you fix that? Instead of my final project, what would be better? I spotted vague terms, grammar and punctuation. Yeah. There's a reason why I call this one a bad example. Instead of my final project, what is it?
The project.
It's the project, right? It's the project. When I write, I think, okay, remember, there's no actors. There's no one performing the action. It's the project. The project, it's, you know, passive voice. The project will be, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do that. You know, and it's like it's made by elves, right? And there's no humans involved. It just magically happens. The project will deal a lot. Oh, okay. I don't know what that means. With random number generations and with classes and recreating and creating new objects from those classes. Well, first of all, that last part about classes and creating new objects from those classes, entire point of the course, everybody in this class that does a project will create classes and then we'll create objects from those classes. So that first sentence doesn't tell me anything. With my final project, I am trying to achieve a very simple RPG game. So what about that sentence? First of all, the program again, the pronouns again, my and I. What else? Creating an RPG game in an introductory course. Oh no, that actually can be done. And remember, it's about being smart about it. It's about scaling down the degree of the RPG. Yeah, role-playing game RPG, using an acronym without telling me what it is. Every single time you use an acronym, on the first use, you have to spell it out. How strict is this rule? I write reports for the FAA. I write them for the FAA. They get edited and reviewed by the FAA. Sometimes I have co-authors in the FAA. And guess what I have to do the first time I say FAA? Spell it out. Same trick with, ERAU. You might say, this project will help ERAU club, blah, blah, blah. Well, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, parentheses, ERAU. Now, acronyms are great because, tech writing can get wordy, and so you end up using acronyms quite a bit. And in fact, that's one of the features of tech writing is, whenever you move to a new company, you have to learn their alphabet soup of acronyms. And so I recommend using them, but spell them out on first read. Okay, and also the final project I am trying to achieve. Well, we all know that that you're trying to achieve these things. We all know there's no guarantee of success. That's fine. That sentence could be so much shorter. In fact, it could be, the project will be a very simple role-playing game. It's a lot shorter and it gives you more information, the same amount of information. And by the way, I recommend that. As far as I'm concerned, with your introductory paragraph, with your introduction, there's 2 questions that should be answered, and answer them as soon as you can. What is it that you're making and why? What is it that you're doing and why? And the reason I stress that is there are times in your life when you have to read a lot of papers and you're kind of shuffling through and seeing, okay, is this paper valuable to me? Think about it. If you're doing a report where you have to do a lot of research, is this thing valuable to me or not? Because if it's not, I don't want to read it. So right away, the first thing you want to know, this paper tells you about X, Y, and Z because of blah, blah, blah. And right away I know, okay, I didn't need to know about X, Y, and Z. Throw it out. So right off the bat, I think a great first sentence is, the second one should be first. The project will be a simple role-playing game, and then role-playing game RPG. And it says RPG game, which is kind of weird the way acronyms work. I wouldn't give too much of it. The game is a very similar basis. That's wrong. BASIS to a game called Darkest Dungeon. I don't know what that is. On Steam, I don't know what that is. It is a very simple game. I don't know what simple means. But it does its job well. I don't know what it is in there. I'm planning to use the RNG element. There we go again with the I don't know what RNG is. I think it's random number generator, but you should tell me. Element of the code to deal with random enemy encounters. The game is pretty much choosing a direction and heading that way. See, this pretty much. The game is pretty much. So you can see why I was not thrilled with this. Oh, by the way, I can't say right now if there will be any graphics or if it will be all text. How would you handle that? What if you weren't sure if you were going to go with a GUI or text? How would you write that?
You could write it within this project, a GUI or
It's not easy. Yeah.
It's been undetermined at this moment.
Exactly.
But it will be determined.
Exactly. Right. Right. You can say something like that. The decision has not been made, or it is undetermined at this moment if the game will be presented to the player as a GUI, as graphics or text. This decision will be made during the design cycle. That's fine. Why? Because you gave me information. And the information you gave me is you still have something that you need to consider, but that's information. I had asked them in this to talk about what they thought the problems were going to be, and that was a disaster. So I don't ask you guys to do that anymore. After you do your code, you'll realize what the problems were. I try to warn you ahead of time. Let's look at a better one. And even with these good ones, see, there's the title page. Even with these good ones, we're going to find some issues, or we're going to find some personal, some style choices and things like that. This program is a simulation of the card game Rook. Why do I like that sentence?
Because it's straightforward. It tells you what it is.
Yeah, it tells me exactly what's going to happen. Now, the author has set up an expectation in my head, by the way. I don't know what Rook is, but we can't expect the author to explain it in one sentence, right? So later on, I better see some definition of what Rook is. If you're going to do a game, I think I probably wouldn't allow this project anymore. If you're going to do a game like this, by the way, you have to list all the rules of the game. So one thing, like when I used to get a lot of blackjack people, and they would never tell me how to play blackjack, but you have to list all the rules of the game. Now that right there is probably a full page of rules for Rook. In order to put this card game into context, multiple game types with descriptions are listed below. By the way, as soon as I see that, multiple types with descriptions are listed below, I think this is done in paragraph form. What a great place to do bulletized list or a table. These descriptions also, we could get rid of also there. These descriptions highlight the unique features of each card game in order to draw natural comparisons, blah, 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 blah. I think this is not bad stuff. So they say comparing games, and then later on another popular class of games are shedding games. By the way, I would get rid of the word popular. Why?
It's a claim.
It's a claim. And that sentence works just fine, doesn't it, with another class of games? It doesn't have to be popular. You're just telling me a different class. That could be a whole new paragraph, right? You could do a paragraph on the comparing games, a paragraph on the shedding games, and then a paragraph on the trick-taking games. Or, you know, like I said, you could put them all into a table if you want. See appendix in the paper for a summary of the rules for this specific card game. What a clever thing to do. So now I know the rules for Rook, and it doesn't take up space and destroy the narrative. Here we are again. This project is trying to achieve. I know you guys are trying, so that's okay. But look at all the extra words in there. What this project is trying to achieve is to create a simulation of a game that fulfills all these rules. Stop right there. If you're going to create a simulation of the game, of course you're going to follow all the rules. And of course you're trying. So this project, how can we shorten that? This project creates a computer simulation of Rook, which really we already knew. So the second part, while at the same time programming non-player characters, NPCs, to where the program has the ability to play the user in a game with reasonable strategic ability. Okay, so we're gonna have non-player characters. So that whole paragraph came down to one thing. The project will have non-player characters. One human player and X, you know, and 1 to 5 non-player characters. We could get that. I asked him to do problems. I'm not asking you to do that. Most people in the class don't have enough experience in programming to anticipate what the problems will be. This one's fairly good. What do you think of the first sentence? The wait time manager is a program intended to monitor the wait time of theme park attractions as its primary function. What do you think? What, do you like it or hate it or somewhere in between? And do you think you could improve it, or is it really like, my gosh, I cannot improve that sentence? Yeah, I think it's good. Yeah, that's a good opening sentence. If I was going to wordsmith it, I would get rid of as its primary function. Because, oh, yeah. The wait time manager. Yeah, they should have capitalized that, right? The wait time manager. Yep. The wait times and various data related to them are to be archived for research and improvement purposes. Also included is a simulator to test the growth of wait times on the attractions in question. By the way, this is what we call in general a queuing model. And I've on the examples of topics that I gave you several queuing models, like the elevator model. You can do bank teller models. This is basically a queuing model. And so this person had to learn a fair amount about queuing models to do this work, or at least I tried to encourage them to. Fortunately, they had a lot of real world experience from Disney that they were applying. The wait times and various data related to them are to be archived for research and improvement purposes. What do you think of that sentence? By the way, is it grueling to go through this sentence by sentence? That's how you write. Wait times and various data related to them are to be archived for research and improvement purposes. What do you think? Various, yeah. And here's one reason, first of all, I am going to argue that we get rid of it, but here's one reason why I'm going to let it not be horrible here. I don't think it's good, but it's not, oh my God. Because what the author's doing here is setting up the expectation that that will be explained to us later. Now, if it's never explained, it's not good. But on the other hand, did you get any information from that? Did you get any real information from various data? I didn't. So I could think that that sentence could be shortened to just the data will be archived for research purposes. Because even that improvement is a result of research. Or the data will be archived for future analysis. Nothing wrong with that. And look how much shorter it is. And even though you don't know what the data is yet, would you expect to know what the data is by the second sentence? I think that as long as you know, there's an expectation there that that's going to be explained later. Also included is a simulator to test the growth of wait times on the attractions in question. That was a little confusing. I'm not sure what's happening there. Test the growth of wait times with respect to what? Ride length, ride efficiency, ride downtime, population at the park, attendance at the park. That comes later. I think that person threw that in because they felt like that first paragraph wasn't complete. That's my guess. I haven't talked to them. But I think you could get rid of that third sentence altogether, and that's a perfectly fine introductory paragraph, although you might want to throw the why in there. The why would be, the purpose would be to improve the performance of, improve the throughput or decrease the wait times of for customers at attractions, or to increase the throughput of an attraction. We get the why here, right, about the whole thing with this. And they talk about where wait times are measured directly by measuring the time it takes for me to get from the beginning line. And if I remember right, this person does talk about a particular system that Disney has or had at the time, and you would really need to do citations and reference. Like the inspiration for this program where wait times are measured directly by measuring the time it takes, blah, 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 blah. That's a claim. That's a claim. You need a citation somewhere in there. System can be inaccurate as the time being measured would be old. That's a claim. All right, so there are issues, even though this is a good example, there are some issues with this. And it's the claims. Most people don't realize when they're making a claim. Now they're giving us a scenario, that's all good. Now, by the way, at some point we need to describe what the functionality of the program is, and I'm not going to go through that with this, but look at these. I think if I haven't posted them online, I will, but I'm pretty sure I posted them online. At some point you need to say how you're going to do what the problem is, right? So you're going to say this thing will study X, X number of attractions, X population, and you can even start to put in some queue, this is queuing theory. You can go to queuing theory references. And by the way, if anyone's doing a queuing theory model, I'll be happy to send you references that talk about, you have arrival rates and service time and departure rates, and all these things go together. And then, you can do analysis on the average wait time, the longest wait time. Oh, that's analysis, that's statistics. Okay, here's the formulas for that. All in terms of the problem, you can do that. Notice you're not talking about your code at all, and other than what you want it to do. You're really talking about the problem. If the problem is a platformer game, then talk about the game, not the software. Talk about the game. Now, initially, you're going to say, yeah, it's going to be presented on a GUI or whatever. If it's a choose your own adventure, it's going to be graphics or text. This decision will be made later, but here's how you play the game. So with the Rook example, they put the rules in there because here's how you play the game. You're focusing on the topic and the problem, not the computer. Remember, this could be done without a computer. This analysis could be done without a computer. You could do it pen and paper. It'd be annoying, but you could do it. So on this portion of the project, I want you to focus on not how you're going to get it done. That's the next one. That's the P3 deliverable. I want you to focus on what you're trying to do. obviously you're gonna have to talk some about, oh yeah, there's gonna be a non-player characters and player characters. There's gonna be computer opponents and human players or whatever. That's all fine. But you're not trying to define your software yet. You're trying to define your problem or your game or your simulation or your, I think someone's doing a task scheduler, right? A task scheduler. Okay, we're past time. Any questions before I go?
I have a question about
Excuse me?
my program. So for my project, I was going to do a type of maze game.
Yeah.
Where it would be basically 2 players and there would be a little like almost battleship type graph, and then it would randomly generate a maze. I just wasn't sure if that would be allowed. And like there would be like a race to see who finishes first.
It's allowed. It's harder than you think. And if you have 2 players, are they going to be networked or are they going to be at the same computer?
Same computer.
Okay. Yeah, you can do that, but think through how you're going to get your inheritance too.
Okay.
Right. People always think visually, oh, the maze, that's easy. It's a visual graphical thing. No, it isn't. How are you going to represent that maze in data? In other words, without showing a maze on the screen, how would I play that maze game in the console?
Probably, I would say use a 2D array. That's my guess.
Right. So you want, exactly. So you want to think through those kinds of problems. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.